Hey there, baby boy. Welcome to my first Blender tutorial. This is going to be everything that I wish I had known when I first started. And I'm going to split up the video so it's easier to digest and it allows you to jump around to certain parts that you want a refresher on. So let's get started. When you first open Blender, you're going to be greeted by a camera, a cube, and a light. And we need to set up Blender in a way that we don't see this anymore every time we open Blender. So select everything by pressing A, select all, and then press X to delete them. So now we need to change some of our preferences. Let's go up to Edit, Preferences, and in the Preferences, we need to go down to Key Map. Oh, give me a moment. In Preferences, we need to go to Key Map, which is right here. And in the Key Map, we need to change Blender's hotkeys back to Blender. It's going to be tough, but you should learn Blender for Blender. You won't regret it. In the spacebar action, we need to click search. This is my favorite feature of Blender, and I'm sure it'll be yours too after you start using it. Now go to System and enable any GPUs that you have. Once you've enabled that, you can close the preferences. There's one more setting that I always turn off, and that's in Edit, down here in Lock Object Modes. I turn that guy off. And then I go to File, Defaults, and save the startup file. That's it. Now if you go to File, New, General, you will see that there's no more camera, cube, or point light. Real cool stuff. Let's talk about windows. The first window I want to talk about is the viewport. The viewport's really cool. This is where we're going to do pretty much everything, like modeling, sculpting, etc. This is our view into the 3D space. In this view, up here in the top right, you have viewport shading, material shading, solid shading, and wireframe. This is really important to know this location. This is where it's going to change how your viewport looks. The next thing to know about is the outliner, and you can find that right here. The outliner is how you're going to organize your scene. You can do that with the use of collections, and you can add new collections by pressing this button right here, New Collection. Just below the outliner is our properties. This is for like scene stuff and materials and modifiers and stuff like that. All like the juice of Blender. It's all here. Now, as a beginner, it's not that useful to know how to rip windows. In my experience, people who learn how to rip windows at first, this usually happens. I'm sure you have done this. I'm sure you have added a plethora of windows to your scene. And then you look at this and you don't know how to fix it. And you say, all right, Blender's stupid. And you close it and you never think about it again. Okay, well, here's your solution, baby boy. Instead of ripping windows like that, save that until you have a little bit more experience in Blender. Up here, the foundation, the Blender Foundation, has given us these workspaces, and you can add more with this plus symbol. And this has everything that you'll need. But you have modeling, sculpting, UV editing, texture paint, shading. And what it does is it rips and configures windows exactly for you so you don't have to do it. It's really useful. Would recommend. Just down here is your timeline. This is how you can play your animations. This is how you start and end, and your current frame. And you have a playhead right here as well. So that's pretty much it for Windows. So let's learn about how to navigate the viewport. It's pretty simple stuff. If you press middle mouse, you'll be able to rotate the camera. If you press middle mouse and shift, you'll be able to drag the camera. And if you press control and middle mouse, you'll be able to zoom the camera. The other thing to know is if you have a numpad, if you press the numbers, they will take you to different views. So 1 takes you to front view, And 3 takes you to right view. That's my most used views. And then if you rotate the camera, it takes you out of the orthographic view. And if you also need to know what this angle looks like, you could press 5 on the numpad and it'll take you into orthographic view. Every window, well, most every window, has the hotkeys T for tools and N for properties. N doesn't really make too much sense. And don't confuse these properties with the actual property editor. This is properties per the view. So I'm going to press N and T to get them away. And even if you don't remember those, look for these little carrots right here. And if you just click that, it will pop it out. And then if you hover your mouse right on the edge, you get the old double arrows, and it allows you to just like scale it back in. Yep. Goodbye, menus. We don't need you. So now that we've learned about navigation in the viewport, let's learn about object transformation. So in order to do that, we need to add an object into our scene. We can do this many ways. You can go up here to the top left of the viewport and go to the Add menu, click that, and add a mesh cube. The second way to do it is to press spacebar and search Add Cube. And you can see that the search function has where the menu is, or where it is in the menus, the hotkey, the submenu, and the object that we're going to be selecting. So I'm going to grab that, and it showed us that it was Shift A. So I'm going to hit Shift A to add another cube. We have 3 cubes here, and this is a good time to teach you guys about what I like to call soft undo. If I select this guy and press G for grab, that's how I remember it anyway, is whenever you grab something, you're normally changing the location of it. So I'll press G, and you'll see I can move the object around. Now, what I meant by soft undo is if you right click, it will cancel that last action. So I'll move it, and if I hit left click, it'll confirm. So I'm going to undo that to show you it one more time. Move it, right click to soft undo, move it again, left click to confirm. So I'm going to undo that. Now I'm going to move these guys based on the world axis. So you see Y, X, and you don't see it, but Z is up. So I'm going to press G, and then if you press X, Y, or Z after pressing G, you can move it based on the axis that it's constrained to. I will do the same thing with this one, but this time I'll do G, Y. And so now I can move it on Y. And then for this last one, I will do G, Z. So now you see that I have boxes moved based on the axis that I had chosen. If you press R, you can rotate. And if you press S, you can scale. And the axes constraints work just as well in rotation and scale. So I'm going to rotate this one, but I'm going to hit Y and rotate it on Y. This one, I'm going to rotate it, but I'm going to rotate it on Z. And this one, I'm going to scale on X. Just right off the bat, this is the hotkeys you need to learn. G, S, and R, and then the ability to constrain it on X, Y, and Z. Because we can take this a step further. Say I select this one, and I want to move it on X and Y. I could just hit GX, move it a couple units, and then GY, and then move it a couple units. Or, let me undo that. I can press G, and then Shift Z. And so that's going to move it on the other axes. So if I wanted to do Shift or move it on the Y and Z, I would do Shift X. And the same thing for Shift Y, we'll move it on X and Z. Really cool stuff. Now, if you wanted a little bit more precision, you could hit G, Y, and then you can actually input the value that you want. So 12. I just moved it 12 units. So I'm going to undo that. Do you see this orange dot? This is very important when it comes to transformations, because this is where the object is transforming at. It's transforming at the origin of the object, and that's what this orange dot is called. So if I wanted to clear my transformations, I can press N, go to the item menu, and I can go over here to location and press 0 and enter 0, 0. And the same thing for rotation, but this time I'm going to do 0, tab, 0, tab, 0. And so this will allow me to tab quickly through them. Now, I'm not going to do this for this one. I just want you to see what's going to happen to the location rotation. So if you want to clear it with a hotkey, if you hold Alt and then plus G, R, or S, it will clear the location. If you do Alt G, it will clear the rotation if you do Alt R, and it will clear the scale if you do Alt S. Let me show it with this guy. Yeah. Now, let me move this back out one more time. Now, what if I was blocking something out and I needed my origin of my object to be at world origin? Well, that's called applying transformations. And in Maya, it's called baking transformations. So if you hit Control A, you can apply it. Or go to Object up here in the menu and hit Apply. Or search it with spacebar. Apply all transformations. Now what that does is it's going to put the dot back at the origin here. So that pretty much concludes transformation. And just to recap, you can move it, you can rotate it, and you can scale it. And you can also move it and rotate it and scale it based on axes. And you can also do 2 axes at once. Really powerful stuff. Would recommend taking the time, take 20 minutes, and just explore this. Really reinforce the transformations. So I'm going to press A, that we learned at the beginning of the video, to select everything and hit X to delete it. I'm going to add another object, and if you don't remember how, remember, you can press spacebar and type in add cube. And I'm going to do mesh because I want a mesh object. Now that we know the hotkeys G, R, and S, let's go ahead and go to some of the first features that you should learn when you go into edit mode. You can go into edit mode a few ways. You'll learn that Blender has many ways to do one thing. It's whatever your preference, it's whatever your workflow becomes. You could go up here, the top left of the viewport, and go down to edit mode. And this will take us into the mesh of the object. And so if you press 1, then you get vertices. If you press 2 on the keyboard, you get edges. And if you press 3 on the keyboard, you get faces. And you can find that right next to the mode switcher up here is vertices, edges, and faces. But also remember, 1, 2, and 3 will allow you to quickly switch between them. So now that we know about how to select our vertices, edges, or faces, let's learn some of the first edit mode modeling that will get you 80% of the way there. Go into face select mode by pressing 3 on the keyboard. And then G, R, and S also works in edit mode. So if I press G, you can see that I move it around. And if I press Z, bring it up and down like this. So I'm going to move this up like this to get a tall boy. Oh yeah, look at that tall boy. And I'm going to do my very first tool. It's called Edge Loop and Slide. Add an edge loop like this. And if I roll the scroll wheel, I can add more loops. I don't want to add that many, so I'm just going to go and stick to 3. Now, if you confirm it, it will allow you to slide it. If I didn't want to slide it like I am doing now, I can press right click and it'll reset it back to the center of the object. The next thing that we need to learn is how to extrude things. Now, if you press 3 on the numpad, it'll take you into face select mode. And I will click this and I will press E to extrude it. You can remember that by E. Now, these are the hotkeys for it. But if you wanted to use tools, you can press T for tools. And I'm just going to push it just a little bit here because I like having this kind of fat menu, not the long menu. And extrude is right here. If you notice, there's these little carrots. And if you click and hold, it gives you different options. Play around with some of these settings and just have fun. Loop cut, it does not slide it. You can only cut into it like that. So every operator or action you do in Blender has additional options that are not all right clear to you. Let's go back into face select mode by pressing 3, and I'll select this topmost edge here. And then I will press E to extrude it. And if you notice down here in the bottom left of your viewport, there is this menu right here, the extrude region and move. I have these options now available to me. I can decide to move it more here and some other things that you can play around with. And the same thing for edge loop and slide. Remember, that is Control R. You see the context menus here. If you flip that open, you can increase the number of loops and you can increase the smoothness, which will make it kind of fatter like this. So now that we know about extruding and loop cutting, there is some more advanced selection modes that you can do. If you press 2 to go into edge select mode, and you hold Alt and select one of these edges, it will do a loop select. And so we can press S and R and G. I'm just going to undo some of that. Now, if you press Alt for a loop select and then hold Shift, it will add to that selection. And if you double click a selected edge with Shift plus Alt enabled, it will deselect it for you. Now, the next selection I want you to be aware of is something called Grow Selection. So I'm going to go into face select mode and select this face right here. And I'm going to press Control plus. And that's Control plus on the numpad. And that will call what's growing selection. So here I am growing and shrinking the selection with minus. The next selection mode that I want you to be aware of is something called linking. Now, if you hover over something and then press L, you will select everything that's linked to the face, edge, or vertex linked to that vertex. So I'm going to just click off of it to deselect it, and then do it again, just to show you that it selects everything. There's one more feature in edit mode that I think you would really benefit in knowing how to use. Is if you go into edit mode, I'm going to tab back into edit mode, and then I'm going to add some loop cuts by pressing Control R. And I'm going to select this middle vert right here. And if you look in the middle part of your viewport, in the top here, there's this little slope, and right next to it, there's this circle. Click that circle, and it'll turn on proportional editing. By default, proportional editing has connected only turned off. But if you click the slope, it'll give you different fall-off shapes. And I like to turn on connected only. So now if I press G and then Z, you can see that I'm affecting all of the verts that are in this radius. If I decrease the radius with my mouse wheel, I'm only selecting this amount. And you can change the shape, say to sharp, to linear, to sphere. Really just experiment with the ones that you're going to need for your project. So now that we know about those editing features, I want to show you 3 operators that I use very frequently. And that is duplication, separation, and joining objects. So I'm going to go into object mode here, and then I'm going to press Shift D. And Shift D is the shortcut for duplication. Remember, you can press search to duplicate objects that way. And it tells you where it is in the menus and the hotkey. So I'm going to duplicate it one more time. So I have these 3 cubes here in my scene. And I'm going to join these 3 cubes together with Control J. Now, you're going to get tired of me saying this, but you could always press search bar and type in join, and it will tell you where the menu is and the hotkey. By the end of the video, if you take away anything from this, it'll be that you know about the search function. So let's tab into edit mode here. And I want to hover over to these cubes, and I'm going to press L to select linked, and press L to select linked, and I'm going to press P to separate. If you notice, I took the 2 cubes that were in my object and I separated them, and so now they are their own object. We have 2 cubes in one object and 1 cube in its own object. And duplication also works in edit mode. You'll find that duplication works in a lot of features in Blender. In edit mode, in the dope sheet, in object mode, in the node editor. Duplication is one of those universal keys like GR and S. I'm going to tab back into object mode. I'm going to select this cube object. I'm going to select this cube object, and I'm going to press Control J to join them. And I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to select linked all of these cubes that are not in the center, and I'm going to delete them. Now you'll notice my origin is over here, and just to clean it up, I'm going to apply my transformations, and you can do that with Control A. Let's talk about the cursor. I'm dying to talk about the cursor. You see this guy right here? This little red and white crosshair? He's confusing at first, but just bear with me here. The cursor is where objects get instanced in. If you add an object, it gets added to the cursor. Now, if you're using left click select and you press shift and right click somewhere, you will move the cursor. And so I'm going to press shift A and add it. See how an object was added to the cursor? The cursor has some other functionalities that are pretty cool, and it involves changing the origin. If you press shift S for snapping, I will snap the cursor to world origin, and that'll send the cursor back to the center. I'm going to tab into edit mode here, and I'm going to select this face. I'm going to open up the snapping pie menu. Cursor to world origin, cursor to selected, cursor to active, cursor to grid. What I'm going to do is cursor to selected. I'm going to tab back into object mode, and I'm going to select this cube. And then I'm going to right click, and in the object context menu, there's this thing called set origin. And I'm going to do origin to 3D cursor. You can see that the orange dot has moved up to the top face of the cursor. And so now it rotates and moves and scales based on the top of the cube. So the last part of this video is going to be showing you how to find your own information and some common gotchas that a lot of new Blender people face. The first thing that I want you to be aware of is if you hover over something in Blender, it will open up a tooltip and it'll kind of tell you some more information about the tool. If I hover over this add menu, it'll tell me that the shortcut is Shift A. So it allows us to find our own shortcuts that we use frequently. So Shift A will allow us to add objects like before. If you notice at the bottom of the Blender window, you can see the version number that we're at, and this bar down here changes every so often. And this is like an additional information about what mode you're currently in. So if I hit Shift, we can see that this part didn't change, but it did tell us that if we right click, we can set the cursor, or we can move objects. Middle mouse is pan view. If I tab into edit mode, you can see how this bottom bar changed. I'm going to just select something that has a sticky operator to it, like this knife tool. And sticky just means that it changes your tool and it doesn't reset back to the selection cursor. But you see how the bottom bar changed, giving you all this information about this tool. Like right here, it says Z is cut through and it's off. So if I press Z, it turns it on, and if I slice my cube, it will cut through it. Now let's talk about some of the pitfalls that people will normally run into. The first one that every Blender baby makes is you'll be hitting undo. Say you did a bunch of stuff. You did a bunch of cool stuff. Look at your city. It's cool. It's floating. And then you say, I don't like those. And then you start undoing. And then you start undoing. But you don't hold control all the way. And then you accidentally get into this mode. This, you just changed it to wireframe preview. And to change that back, in the top right of the viewport is viewport shading. Solid, material preview, and rendered. And how you got there was because you just pressed Z and it opened up a shading pie menu. You made it here, baby boy. Thanks for getting all the way through it. I hope this gives you the tools to hit the ground running and just get over that hill. Because if you can get over that hill, Blender can do so much. It costs you nothing. And it's so cool. So, like, you know, if you want to appreciate Blender like I appreciate Blender, consider joining my Discord. There I'll do classes, and some of those classes will be interactive and they'll be live in real time, and I get to help if you get stuck. It's pretty cool. Additionally, in the description, there's a PDF with all of the hotkeys that we used in the video. If you like the video, consider subscribing and, you know, comment kind of what you want to see in Blender taught this way, and I'll get down to brass tacks and I'll make it for you. Okay, bye-bye.